Welcome into the install Christmas week edition. No presents under the tree for Titans fans, Greg's. A big fat elimination graphic is what they were greeted with this past Sunday, them and the New York Jets. But we understand that this team is fighting uphill against a lot of things right now, and that this felt like a bit of an inevitability.
Yeah, I mean, this did not feel like one of those seasons going back, what a good more than a month or so, Buck. And, it just, offensively, it's been a struggle all season. When a team has an identity of how they want to play and they can't play that way, that's really hard in the middle of a season to change, particularly when your quarterback situation then becomes in flux and you start playing with a rookie quarterback. It's hard to make that kind of, to use a football term, that kind of sudden change in the middle of a season. And clearly they could not play this year the way they wanted to play, what their identity has been, which is the run game. They had major changes on the O-line. Obviously, it has not worked out as we speak today. Derrick Henry is not what he was. He's not been able to compensate for the fact that the O-line is not very good. And then they had the quarterback change. So even though I think Will Levis has shown a lot more positive than negative, he's still a rookie quarterback playing on what is essentially not a very good offense because of the O-line. So there's just been too many things that made it that we're having this conversation now about not being in the playoffs, so it is what it is.
No, and that happens in the NFL. It's a part of the life cycle of these franchises. Yeah. And, just to kind of go in to start with the quarterback, because Levis right now, Greg, it's Wednesday afternoon. They've had their first day of practice, and I would anticipate, even though it's early, I would anticipate Ryan Tannehill starting against the Seahawks.
Oh, really?
On Christmas Eve right now. That just how things are trending. We'll see what the rest of the week looks like. No determinations have been made for the audience. But that is my gut feeling at this point based on where Will Levis is health-wise. So,
well, it's funny because when I saw it, I'm thinking, oh man, that looks really bad. And, then when he walked off and wasn't even limping, I thought, wow, okay. Not that he's going to be ready to rock and roll, but, and go out dancing that night or anything. But I thought, okay, wow, it's obviously not going to be really bad.
No. And quarterbacks have played through high ankle sprains before this year. If we'll see if he can protect himself well enough, then I would imagine they would see it in his best interest to play, just because the reps are invaluable, even though the team is eliminated. But I want to look at him in this game. He's only thrown 3 interceptions on the season, Greg, but Sunday in the second half of this one against the Texans, on that rollout concept that they were trying to execute, it seemed like one of the worst ones that he has thrown, even though he's only thrown 3.
Let me ask you a question, and I'll tell you what I think.
Okay.
Did you hear anything from anybody? Was it talked about at all?
He walked us through it, what he was seeing.
Let me tell you what I saw before you tell me what he said.
Go ahead, and I'll once you tell the audience, I'll just read directly from the transcript of Will Levis for the audience.
Okay. So what happened is I think this was a clearly designed play. It was 2nd and 8 on the third quarter possession. Okay. The Titans ran Burks across the formation outside of Hopkins. They'd been getting a ton of quarters coverage. To me, this concept was to attack quarters coverage. So they ran Burks across the formation, as I said, outside of Hopkins, and he was going to run the clear route, which would lift the corner Nelson. So Levis off play action boot could hit Hopkins on the outcut from the slot, which would then be in front of the safety, who would have to match Hopkins. Okay. That to me was what they assumed they were going to get. What happened on the play, though, is Nelson, who's a veteran, he read it. You could see his eyes all the way on Hopkins. So he never lifted with Burks. Now, Burks was wide open on a vertical route, but that wasn't the play. And Levis is coming off hard run action, booting left. So you're not just tossing it, booting left, 40 yards down the field. And the design of the play was to hit Hopkins, in my view anyway. And Nelson was sitting right there. And for whatever reason, I don't think Levis confirmed that. I think you need to confirm that Hopkins is going to be open, and he just threw the ball based on the play call, and obviously Nelson was sitting there, so he threw it right to Nelson, and therefore it looked really, really bad.
Yeah, and that's basically what he told us in the post game. He said, "Yeah, that's on me. One of my keys that I was reminding myself on that play was to make sure the corner carries, as you just
Yep.
articulated. So I saw his back turned, and then I was waiting for Hopkins. During that time, with my eyes on him, the corner's falling off of Traylon Burks where it happened. So I just didn't see him, didn't feel him. Got to learn from it. Next time, the ball's got to be launched, and that's a touchdown."
Yeah, yeah, and that's okay, yeah, because that's exactly the way I saw it.
Yeah.
So obviously, I was right, which is good because that's what I saw. But yeah, that's as soon as I saw the motion and what Burke's route was, my sense was okay, that's what they're trying to get done. And but Nelson's a veteran, and like I said, his eyes went right to Hopkins. He'd probably seen this route concept, which is not an abnormal one. Everybody has it, where you lift the corner with your outside versus quarters, your outside receiver, and your number 2 receiver, the slot receiver, runs the outcut. And it's 99.9% of the time that's going to be there, Buck. But this time Nelson sat there.
So you started the podcast kind of talking about that they can't execute how it is that they're built to play. The identity of what the Titans has been is not something that this current team or this what's left of this team as we work through injuries
Correct.
and things like that is capable of playing to. And Greg, we talked about this in the offseason that they would have to make a determination about how they played, right?
Correct.
And whether they wanted to continue to kind of white knuckle these things out the way that they tend to do, or to try and find a way to kind of get more explosive plays in their passing game and find ways to push the ball down the field more effectively now that Derrick Henry is starting to wane. We've seen some of that, but there's so much that they cannot accomplish, Greg, because of that offensive line. Because you see them trying to run the football. They obviously can't. Derrick had 24 yards after contact and only 9 total yards in the game. It kind of speaks to the futility of him getting hit behind or at the line 50% of the time that he gets the ball this season. They can't drop Levis back as they did in the second half for, an entirety of a game, because he got sacked 7 times in the second half, and those were all of the sacks in the game. The offensive line is hindering them so much, and it just makes it so much harder to evaluate what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and believe me, I'm on social media, so I see a lot of the comments. I'm not talking about fans. I'm talking about people who cover the team, and a lot of people are saying, well, they didn't have success running the ball on first down, so why do they keep doing that? Well, that's easy to say, but what do you want them to do? You want them just to drop back Will Levis behind an offensive line that can't really protect? I mean, it's a tough situation. So they're doing, philosophically, they're doing the best they can. I mean, one of the things that stands out to me about Henry, and I know there wasn't a lot of room, but there were runs, Buck, where there was a little space at the first level. And normally when Derrick Henry, the great Derrick Henry, and there's no question he was the great Derrick Henry, normally if that was the case, he gets 7-8 yards. He was always a back that if it was blocked for 3, he got 8. And now when it's blocked for 3, he's getting 3. And that's a sure sign that a back is kind of more on the back end of his career than in the middle or the front end of his career. But the point is, they can't play the way they want to play, and they're playing with a rookie quarterback and a bad O-line, so they can't just say, let's drop back and wing it. So they're kind of, that's why there's so much play action. And the play action actually was effective. They had play action under center, which was effective. They had a beautiful 17-yarder to Hopkins. I believe it was late third quarter, which was shotgun run game, gap scheme run game play action. And he hit Hopkins on the sort of the condensed bang 8, condensed skinny post, as some would call it. So they were, they're trying to work around it, but it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah. So they'll host the Seattle Seahawks this weekend. Seattle coming off a season-saving win against the Eagles, Craig. I mean, I know it wasn't just Drew Lock and Julian Love, but that was a really cool moment for both of those two players, given their respective circumstances.
Yeah, no, and Drew Lock, I've had a chance to be around Drew Lock. I met him. I actually met his family. He's a great kid. And he's not a great quarterback, but he can throw the ball. And they've got weapons on the outside. They're starting to play a lot more out of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers. A year ago and through the early part of this season, they were, relatively speaking, heavy out of multiple tight end personnel because Jackson Smith-Njigba was hurt, but they drafted him in the first round, and you don't draft a receiver in the first round not to play him. So they've kind of evolved through the course of this season into being an 11 personnel offense. And Smith-Njigba, by the way, is a really, really good player. He was primarily a slot at Ohio State, but in the context of the Seahawks offense, he's lining up in multiple spots. In fact, the winning touchdown he caught, he was the boundary X, the single receiver to the short side of the field. And he beat James Bradbury for the touchdown on a really good ball by Locke. So they have weapons. They've got a really good back who can be explosive in Kenneth Walker. So this is not an easy offense. Now, the assumption would be that Geno Smith would be back this week because it seemed he was close last week. So that would be the assumption. But, it's a groin. You never know with those kinds of injuries. But, if he is, Geno's become a very professional quarterback. He needs to be protected. That's critical. But, if he's protected and he feels pretty comfortable in the pocket, he can make every throw and he can push the ball down the field. And certainly Metcalf can run by people. Lockett can still run. Smith-Njigba is not, even though he caught the vertical touchdown, he's not really a burner, but he's got tremendous, tremendous lateral juice. I mean, I noticed that at Ohio State watching his 2021 tape because he was injured in 2022. And then seeing him on the field at the combine, just seeing that lateral quickness. I mean, he might have been the quickest guy laterally at the combine in the receiver group.
I don't know if we talked much about Geno. Titans and Seahawks didn't play last year, Greg, but he's done so well to kind of navigate what has been his NFL career and come out to the point where, I don't know how much winning he's going to do in this
Sure.
third or fourth iteration, but it's still so cool to see a player still be able to elevate themselves at the most important position in sports a decade into his career, essentially. Geno is what I guess have you made in watching him? I know you talk Seahawks from time to time.
Yeah, look, you always hear people say, well, you're not going to win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. Well, there's probably a lot of quarterbacks you can say that about, but there's 32 teams, so you need 32 starting quarterbacks. Sure. And hey, and every once in a while, something happens with a team where you don't think the guy is necessarily a Super Bowl quarterback, and they're in the Super Bowl. That sometimes that happens. So you can line up and play with Geno Smith. He's become a professional quarterback that if you have enough team, see, that's the thing. It's always easy to say that, oh, Patrick Mahomes, this, we're talking about great quarterbacks, okay? There's not many of those guys. There's not many transcendent quarterbacks. Most of the time you need a team, Buck. You need, elements of a team. So, this is a team that has struggled a bit on the defensive side of the ball. They've been very poor on third down on defense. The run game's been up and down because Kenneth Walker's been in and out of the lineup due to injury. Their O-line had some major injuries this year. Both tackles missed time. So, the team has not been good enough. And Geno is not he's not the kind of quarterback. And as I said, there aren't many that can just put a team on his shoulders and all of a sudden you're great. But if you have team and you protect them and you have a nice scheme, which they do. Shane Waldron is their OC. He came from the Rams. They do some nice things on offense with the pass game. Then, Geno can execute. He can throw the ball. I mean, I know you've seen him through the years. You probably watched him a little getting ready for this week.
Yeah.
And, he can drop back and throw the football now, and he can make every throw.
Yeah, they absolutely push the ball down the field to take advantage of that. It's
no question.
It's really cool to watch. It's just been one of my favorite stories to kind of document or keep tabs on it in the last couple of years in the NFL.
Just a quick point. You know how it goes. When a team gets to a Super Bowl or gets deep into the playoffs with a quarterback that's not considered great, then people say the coach, it's a great system. Like with the 49ers a few years ago with Jimmy G. Okay, it's the Shanahan system, which of course we're hearing now with Purdy, and that's a conversation for another time. But when there is a quote unquote great quarterback, then people say it's the quarterback. So, people they wrap themselves in a pretzel with these kinds of conversations. For the most part, with very few exceptions, you need a team. And I mean, that's the way it works. It's not basketball where one guy, because there's only 5 guys out there where one guy can change everything. Sure, there's a couple of quarterbacks that are truly can make special plays. But as I said, there's not that many of those guys.
Truly. And I think there's a great example in who the Seahawks just beat. Like Philadelphia has stars all over the place. And I know they're still a 10-win football team right now. But Greg, I guess how would you diagnose what the Eagles are going through? Because they've had success. They've obviously dropped 3 in a row now,
In a
which
row.
has I'm sure Eagles fans just in knots, pretzels as you described. But what's going on defensively with them?
Well, defensively is a big issue because I don't know how closely you follow them. Obviously, uh, their sort of foundation a year ago was their ability to rush the quarterback. Okay, that's where it all started. And keep one thing in mind. They were the highest scoring second quarter team in the league a year ago. So they went into the third quarter of almost every game. Obviously, there's a couple not the case, but almost every game with a meaningful lead. So you know what that means, Buck? Of course you do. It means that the opposing team is going to have to drop back and throw the football. So this D line could pin their ears back and rush the quarterback. And they led the NFL in sacks. They led the NFL in third down sacks by a wide margin. So if you told anyone, including myself, before this season started, going right into the season in September, that the Eagles would not be able to rush the quarterback this year, people would probably say you're out of your mind. Well, you know what? They've not been able to rush the quarterback this year. And they've got an aging secondary that, quite frankly, is not good enough to support the lack of a pass rush. So, and I'm not being sarcastic at all, but when you can't rush the quarterback and you don't cover well, you've got issues in pass defense. And that's where they stand on defense right now.
Yeah, it's been now that we're getting into teams jockeying for seeding and things like that. The Eagles with a huge game against the Giants this weekend. They play the Giants, I believe, twice in the remaining
Twice in the
3
last 3
games.
weeks. And people are just assuming with 2 games against the Giants and the middle sandwich game against Arizona that they'll just win out. But, this is the NFL. And it doesn't always happen like that.
You don't got to tell me, Greg. I was in
Right.
Miami. I saw things that I had no business seeing in Miami.
I can't make the Monday night games, just like the Seattle, the Miami Tennessee game. When I woke up the next morning and saw the score, I was like, what? And then this week I woke up the next morning and saw that Seattle had beaten Philly, and I'm like, what?
I almost think that's a more fun way to do it. Just say,
Yeah.
I'll catch it in the morning. Oh my God, what happened here?
Exactly. I mean, I know I'm going to watch the tape, but I can't. I'm old, Buck. I can't stay up till you're an hour behind, but I can't stay up till close to midnight because I wake up at 4 and I'm in the office at 5:15, so I can't do those late games.
Listen, every time I travel, I'm reminded how sick it is that people on the East Coast watch sports at 8:20 at night. I don't understand how that works, but
yeah. By the way, I thought of you this week, and unfortunately, I thought of you because of
don't
bad news. I felt the same way you did, maybe not quite as badly as you did because you're an alum, but obviously my daughter is my oldest is as well. And when I first saw the score, because I think I didn't see the game live. I'm sure you did. I was out and about, and Saturday's the only day I can kind of be out and about. And even though there was football on, I just have things to, I have things to do.
We all need one day of the week, Greg.
yeah. And I saw the score at one point. They were up by like 15 in the first half, and I'm thinking, oh, this is pretty good. And then when I saw the final, I thought of you, and I was like, oh boy, Buck's probably struggling a bit right now.
I'm not having a good time, and them only beating Morehead State last night by a point.
I know. I saw that score. I didn't watch the game because I was working, and I didn't get home till 9 o'clock. And I'm thinking, wait, what's going on here?
People think I have a bad attitude, Greg. It's just I'm miserable for 4 months because of my basketball team. There's no other way that I can explain it. Anyway, quickly, a plug for the NFL Matchup Show, which is, of course, the way that you get ready for every football weekend. And now that we are down to the wire, just quickly, Greg, some thoughts on what could be a potential Super Bowl matchup. The Ravens and the Niners look like the 2 best teams in their respective conferences. And, I know one is having considerably more health luck than the other, but this is going to be a huge game on Monday night.
Huge game. It's the last game of the weekend on Monday night. I'm really anxious. This to me is one of those great tactical games, Buck. For me, that's the way, because that's the way I see it. Obviously you can love this game on multiple levels. I can't wait to watch the tape. It's an 8:20 game, so I don't know if I'll be there at the end, but I can't wait to see it on tape, see how the Niners attack that defense, which is a really good defense, see what the Niners have in store for Lamar, who I think is playing incredibly good football, incredibly smart football. I just think he's, with this, don't forget, he has a new system this year. He had to learn a new system. And when you've played in one system all your career and then start with a new one, people might assume that's easy. It's not. And I think he's done a really, really good job and is playing really good football, sound football, understanding where to go with the ball, not looking to run as much, making great decisions. I just think he's playing really good football.
And without Mark Andrews, and they're on their what, fifth or fourth running back at this point,
Yeah,
Greg.
they lost Mitchell, who's their juice back. They still have Hill, and Edwards is a really good grinder. He's one of those unknown, overlooked backs that every year on 140 carries seems to gain like 800 yards or close to it, and nobody even thinks about him. But he's been a really important player for them over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one on Monday night, and of course, like I said, you can get ready for it with the NFL Matchup Show each and every week. Greg, a pleasure as always. Even if you're giving me hell about my basketball team, it's
No,
always
I feel the same. Like I said, my older daughter is an alum, so I watch it too. I look carefully at those scores.
well. You, I know, are genuine. When Slay texts me, I know he's just trying to twist the knife a little bit.
Right. Well, I'm sure that's the case, but no, I have the affinity for IU basketball, and that was a tough one.
Indeed. Well, we will convene again. Have a great holiday, you and the family, Greg, and certainly we'll be talking some football when next we meet.
You too, Buck. Thanks.